All right, so let's jump into the housing market. Last week we talked about the labor markets and how that's affecting mortgage interest rates. And the title of that podcast, Steve, that I put on YouTube and on the podcast was why real estate professionals should be excited about 2024. And so in today's episode, I want to give the real estate agents and the loan officers, Steve, that listen to the show even more context around what potentially is coming, dependent on some of the things we're going to discuss today. So before we jump into it, again, Steve Frost, appreciate you jumping on and really educating the real estate agent community. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Hope I'm not boring them to sleep.
No, you're helping people. And so
Yeah.
for anybody in the audience, by the way, okay, so that needs a mortgage partner. This is my shameless plug for Steve. I've been working with Steve for 20 years. If there's a real estate agent out there watching or listening to the show that wants to partner with a true professional, Steve's not licensed in all 50 states, but have a conversation. He's getting there.
Working on it.
Reach out to Steve, have a conversation, and he can explain how he can help your real estate agent business grow and what value there is for you guys to potential partner up. So what's the best way? Can they call you, email you, Instagram you? What's pigeon carry? What is the deal?
I read a whole thing about carrier pigeons, which I won't get into, which that species of pigeon is extinct now, but that's a whole other thing. So yeah, really the easiest way is either on Instagram or we can link my email and phone number below too. So Brandon will tell you that I am a no notifications guy. So if you reach out to me one of those ways and a red dot shows up on my phone, you will get responded to. So
yeah, perfect. I'll put all Steve's contact information below. So all right, let's jump into this. So just I want you to first, like we do every week, give an update on where rates are today, and then we'll talk about what's happening in the market so that we know what to expect moving forward.
Yeah, we're still beating the same dead horse, right? So we're still trading really at the top of the trough as far as rates go. So we're in that pretty much like 7 to 7.25, maybe 7.3 some days. Like if you're looking for a lower cost, like lower cash to closing, and this is referring like 30-year loans, you're looking at something like around 7.5. If your lender understands like people wanting to feel good about things, they'll call it 7.49, and then down to like 6.99. But that's really the range we're trading in, and we'll talk about it more later. But a lot of that's influenced by some of the 10-year Treasury yields and things like that, and really coming from like the Fed talk and the Fed perspective, and a lot of economists, this is where the Fed wants the rates to sit at their peak. To start slowing some things down. So, while it's like, beating a dead horse, because I talk about rates every day, that's really still the range that we're trading in. It's like 0.25% better one day, 0.25% worse the next. Like it's just in that range of around 7%.
Yeah, got it. So, which obviously everybody knows that's watching or listening to the show, which is kind of put a huge damper in the opportunities that we have in the real estate business when it comes to sales. Now, home prices have done fine, right? Home prices continue to hold tough. They have not crashed, but the sales have dropped off a cliff, and so that's how we all get paid, right? So, I want to talk about what we're looking at, Steve, that will lead to potentially mortgage rates dropping the way that I believe that they will. Why a lot of these economists are forecasting rates to come right back down to the high fives, low sixes really soon. I mean, so much so there's a lot of economists that believe we'll be trading in the mid sixes by the end of the year. The high, maybe even a 5 in front of it by the end of the year. So I'm not saying you're saying that, Steve. I'm curious to get your opinion on what would have to occur for rates to come way back down to unlock what I'm calling the pent up demand in this real estate market so that everybody that watches and listens to the show can win. So what has to occur for rates to start coming back down? All right, real quick, and then we'll get right back to the content. If you're a real estate agent, you're looking to build a listing-based business, a business where you can generate a multiple six-figure income, a business that doesn't require you to waste thousands of dollars on the new marketing gimmicks, then I'm going to invite you to click the link right underneath this video to learn about our Listing Agent Academy coaching program. Here's the truth. I will shoot you straight. This program is not for everyone. This is for agents who value being around winners. They value being in a community of other real estate agents that actually show up, that actually put forth the work. And this is for agents that embrace high levels of accountability and visibility. To get the details, all you have to do is click the link beneath this video. You can schedule a coaching consultation, and then you can decide for yourself. So with that being said, let's jump back into the content.
So good question. So it goes, and I'm going to start with talking about what the Fed's job is, right? So there's a lot of conversation out there about the Fed and Jerome Powell and these governors, and you only hear about these guys when stuff is bad, right? When times are good, nobody hears about the Fed, nobody cares about the Fed or any of that and how it's governed and what they're thinking. But really what their primary job there is at the Federal Reserve is to keep inflation around 2%. And to keep America working. It's to protect employment. So it's to keep money in people's pockets to spend and have those jobs support a low rate of inflation. And so inflation is the price of goods. So you want to keep, the number of jobs available. You want to keep the number of people losing jobs at a certain rate. Otherwise, when there's so much work out there and so many opportunities to make more money, they can't control the rate at which the prices on goods rise. And so that's why you're hearing a lot of like this, talking about a soft landing and recessions and all these kind of things, because the Fed's trying to do is they have to take very drastic measures and make this extreme policy tightening that we're seeing. They have to do all those things to get down that rate of inflation, but at the same time, they want the job market to stay intact. And the problem that the Fed is facing is it's working on inflation. And we knew that a lot of inflation would come down as supply chains eased and as America got back to work and got back to a normal cycle after the pandemic, and then also some of those cash infusions through stimulus packages and things like that. So we've seen the core or the headline number for CPI, which is Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation. So we've seen that come from 9% down to 3.7% this month. So that's like a 67% roughly decrease in inflation, which is what the Fed is really happy about. Now, I used this analogy last week and I use it all the time, is that inflation is just like a diet. It's very, very easy to go see Dr. Now. Have you seen that show? It's like, he's like some guy on like a reality show, but he is the first, if you want to lose 100 pounds, the first 70 pounds are easy. It's the last 30 pounds that you have to feel some pain. And the Fed has told us we're going to feel some pain. And we're getting into that point now. And it feels like it's really only hitting us in this industry because it's such a big, stark change. However, it's on Main Street. It's people's grocery bills and gas bills and all these different things. So that's number one. So they're fighting that. And they want to see that inflation number hit 2%. But the reason that we haven't seen a more drastic move in rates with such great improvement in inflation is that the labor market has not corresponded how it normally would. So the labor market, we're showing, we look at jobs created, and we also look at people filing for unemployment for the first time. And so if you look at some of these employment reports you get, so you can see these are 2023 jobs numbers from the BLS. So this is the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and what we call the non-farm payrolls. So the way these work is you get a reading on the first Friday of every month of the previous month's jobs created. So in January, we saw 517,000 jobs. This absolutely positively blew estimates out of the water. Our government came in and they changed the way they calculate that number and changed some multipliers and just invented a whole bunch of jobs out of thin air. But you'll see the one thing we want to look at on here is the next month. So in February, they come back and say, hey, February's job reports came in at 311,000, but also we went back and looked closer at January and they're actually 504,000. And then in March, they say, hey, we gained 236,000 jobs. But we went back and looked at January for a second time, and it was 472,000. So they revised the number down the more they double check their work. So that's some of these numbers that we're looking at here. So you're seeing a clear decrease in the amount of jobs that are created, right? And mind you, a significant portion of these jobs are part-time, seasonal, and no offense, but for people above the age of 55 years old, which they don't consider that the primary driver of the economy for those different sectors, right? So the one thing that we're looking at here, though, guys, is on the third column or the far column here are some of these revisions. Like we saw in our unemployment report that we got in August, is once we revise this for the third time, that jobs number is literally cut in half. If we would have seen 105,000 jobs on July 1st, which reported June's numbers, or July, the first Friday in July, rates would have had a field day. We would have probably seen a 0.5% gain in rates, but it's because they're coming through these revisions. We're not seeing that same impact in the market. But what's the bright side that we look at coming from an interest rate perspective is that that first number, the first reading, is continuing to go down. So that's the first place that we start to see the labor market soften, right? The next place that we see the labor market soften are job openings. And so last month we saw that number drop from, I believe it was like 11 million job openings down to like 8 point something million job openings. So a pretty big decrease in job openings, right? So we start to see that number come down. Once that number comes down, the third and final thing that we see happen are initial jobless claims rise. And so a lot of economists, and if you talk to like like this article that we're quoting here is Logan Mastrami. I hope I got his last name right. But he's, the number that he says that is really that we're going to need to see is that 229,250 moving average. We'll need to see that get up to about 300,000 people a week claiming initial jobless claims, which would mean these people are filing for unemployment benefits for the first time. And so even with looking at that number from last week, that was a holiday week. So it was a 4-day work week. And so that number might even be skewed a little bit. So that's where it's gone from a focus on inflation. Like we got there pretty quick. And with the inflation coming down and less money coming into these companies, they thought hiring would slow as part of it. And it's just not. So that's really the focus of what we're looking at now. And you're seeing it. Like if you look at Delta just came out and said, hey, the higher cost of operating our business are going to start to eat into our profits. We start eating into profits. The last thing that people do is lay people off. So we stop hiring, we stop posting jobs being open, we cut hours, and last but not least, we lay people off. And so that's why that unemployment claim is going to be the last number that we see impacted by all of these changes that we're seeing in our economy. But with the jobs numbers softening, job openings softening, and unemployment claims starting to tick up, we will eventually start to see these rates come down. That's what it's going to take. When we get there, who knows? But the Fed is pinned to the wall on making sure that happens.
That was great. Everything you just, that made a lot of sense. And so, when we look at, so if we look at what for the rest of the year, we say, okay, well, when are these unemployment reports coming out, right? And so when we look at this for 2023, you get one every single month, right? So the next one is coming out on October 6th, right?
Yep.
And so that's exactly what Steve, you're saying is depending on that number, the reason why a lot of economists believe interest rates will start to drastically drop is, to your point, is when we see what's happening in the economy and the Fed essentially taking money out of the market, right? That's what they're doing. These people have a tough time hiring, to your point, right? They stop posting, they stop hiring, and then they start laying people off. We believe that unemployment will continue to go up. Now, this is what a lot of people don't really understand. I had a conversation yesterday with someone in the industry that you and I both know very well, and he didn't understand. He's like, well, why would mortgage rates go down when unemployment is going up? It doesn't make any sense to me. If the economy is doing worse, why would rates go down? And so he didn't understand the correlation, Steve, between unemployment and mortgage rates. Can you speak to that just so the real estate agents have a good understanding of why we're paying such close attention to these jobless claims, to the unemployment report, and how that affects mortgage rates?
So it all goes back to demand destruction, right? Which we've used before. So and it's really getting people to stop spending money. And we haven't done that yet. Have you, I mean, if you're watching this video, you're tuned in enough to see headlines for cash savings being depleted, savings rates going down at record paces, and also record high credit card balances. So we're going to get to a point where people are finally going to stop spending money. And when you're unemployed, or when you're worried, and you have to think, as employers, right? We both employ people. And the last thing you're ever going to do in your bag of tricks when things are tight is lay people off, right? You can change pay, you can change hours, you can change bonus structures, you can do all of these different things to keep the wheels moving. The last thing you ever want to do is lay somebody off. And that's how these companies see it. So these companies will eventually stop spending money. There will be far less incentives. There will be less research and development. There'll be less product rollouts. There'll be less new things. So as these companies start doing these things, the other part of this is, well, then those companies become less valuable, and even potentially those companies become volatile, right? And the trading of those things become volatile. So maybe you don't want to trade in the AI world. You want something other than that, right? Well, then you go over and you're like, wait a minute, I can get a 10-year treasury paying yields at 4.3%, or I can get mortgage-backed securities paying reasonable rates of return at very low cost or at very low risk. And so you start to buy more into those markets. And then the Fed is sitting there saying like, hey, we don't have to charge as high of overnight rates and things like that because we're seeing the demand come down. So they start to change some of their monetary policy, and you start seeing people get back into that bond mortgage-backed security market. When there's more demand for that, you don't have to provide as high of a rate of return. And then we ultimately start to see interest rates come down.
It's amazing.
But the whole thing goes back to getting people to spend less money. And the way you do that is the last resort is to take money out of their pocket. We have to see less paychecks to get people to spend less money. And that's just the way it works.
Yeah. And the key thing that you just said that I want the audience to really take away is, where is the money in these markets going? Because it's going back and forth from like the S&P into bonds. It's like stocks versus bonds. That's really what we're talking about, right? And it's the shifting of money back and forth based on what the economy is doing.
Yep. And then there's the other piece too that we'll kind of see how this unfolds. Like global uncertainty really plays into interest rates nicely. And that if you're watching, like you have Russia and North Korea getting together and trading arms and doing all these different things, and that also creates an international flight to safety. And there's nowhere more safe than the US bond market. And so some of those things, like I said, we've had this liquidity issue where there's been so many issuances of all these new bonds from bank liquidity requirements and government spending and all these things. The more people that more participants that we can get into the bond market, the better off that will be for rates, because these bond traders have to keep absorbing these bonds out there that don't have anything to do with the mortgage market or the unemployment market, but just changes in financial regulations too. So there's a lot of different pieces there. That's why it's hard to predict,
Yeah, it is hard. But I think that the thing that we're really paying attention to is what we just talked about for the last 20 minutes is the unemployment rate. I mean, it really comes down to that. I mean, anybody in the mortgage market, that's what we're paying attention to, because in my opinion, this has proved to be true. I would go as far as that has a bigger impact on mortgage rates than even what inflation does, because that's what we've seen. I mean, inflation, to your point, was at 9%. We're sitting here at 3.7. You would have thought mortgage rates would have been dipped way down to follow inflation like they normally do. They haven't.
Yeah. And so, and the Fed is not keeping that a secret, and they have shifted their focus. So if you watch them and you listen to the press conferences and what they're talking about, they would much rather overshoot demand destruction, right? They would much rather overshoot and have too restrictive of a monetary policy for too long than stop too soon and let inflation creep back up, because if they stop too soon and inflation starts to go back up aggressively, the process to restrict that again is going to be far more painful than it is now.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's the hard part. That's the tricky part.
Yeah. So again, it's yet to be seen, but there's many that believe that rates they're hanging out 7.25%, 7.5%. The belief based on the evidence is that we should start to see those numbers go down as we start to get some of these unemployment reports starting literally in just a few weeks' time. And so as we start to see some of this stuff come out, we should start to see mortgage rates come back down, which again will start to build towards the 2024 housing market. And we should start to see transactions go back up as a result of that. We're coming out of a market where the annualized transaction count will probably be at 4.3 million, which is the lowest we've seen since the Great Recession in 2008, right? Which is the toughest housing market.
Hug your real estate agent.
What's that?
Hug your real estate agent and lender friends. They need it.
Yeah. But next year we should see that go back up, and I'm speculating, but we should start to see that go back up to maybe an annualized transaction count, maybe around 5.7 million again. It's not going to go back up 6.5 like we saw in 2022, but it should go up to 5.7, 5.8, and with 25% less people in the industry, it should set up for those in the industry in 2024 to have an amazing year. So we'll keep you guys updated. We'll come back next week. We'll keep you with your finger on the pulse. So that you can keep your clients up to speed and you can be the expert. So Steve, appreciate you very much. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Thanks, man.